that was kind of like the other things that we were implementing throughout the season, but also like compromising with the athletes. Like they're not going to come out and eat something wildly different that they're not used to.
Hello and welcome to the Eat More Carbs podcast. My name is Jenna Fisher and I'm here with my co-host Reilly Beatty. Today we have NC State's sports dietitian Jesse on to help answer some questions. Before we get into some of those questions, Jesse, can you share just a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Jesse McGinley. I'm a sports dietitian. I work at NC State and just been here almost 3 years now, just working with a bunch of different teams here at the collegiate level, and then have a private practice and a podcast and all the things as sports dietitians. That's a little bit about me.
We are so excited to have you on the podcast to help answer some questions. Before we get into some of those questions, we're going to do our high and low segment where we just share a little bit about our week, the good, and maybe the parts we wish had gone a little bit differently. Reilly, can you kick us off?
Yeah. So I usually start off with my low, but this week I'm going to start off with my high. I got a new workout toy, which I'm really excited about. I got some battle ropes. I'm getting back into working out after having Charlie. So I got my battle ropes. So that's my high. The low is how I got them. Somebody was getting rid of them. They were on the side of the road, but they were literally brand new. So I carried them through the neighborhood and I got lots of looks. My neighbors think I'm crazy, but I got my battle ropes and I'm very excited and I've been working out with them and they've been great.
Wait, how far was that trek?
It was like half a mile, and let me tell you, it was really hard because you don't realize how heavy battle ropes are.
By the end of that trek, you had put in a workout, getting them home.
And my neighbor, she's super active, but she doesn't do a lot of like the gym stuff, and had no idea what they were. She was like, "What is this lady doing?"
But hey, you got battle ropes now, so
yeah, I'm proud of my battle ropes.
A win is a win. Yeah,
exactly.
Jesse, what about you? High and low?
Highs this week. Honestly, still riding the high of the Final Four trek with men's basketball. Go Pack. But yeah, that has been a high. The low has just been reality. Like we're not on the run anymore. I'm just coming back to reality, kind of getting readjusted. It's all been good. That's my highs and lows.
I think we're definitely going to be chatting more later on about the Final Four and everything that you've kind of experienced recently. So very excited to get into those questions. But I will share my high and low real quick before we start chatting. I will start with my high too, because this isn't a high into a low story. I got a new tinted sunscreen because we're entering the season here where I wake up in the morning to take my dog on a walk, and instead of going out and looking like a slug, I could throw on a little tinted sunscreen and feel really put together. So super excited about that. And yesterday my husband gets home from work and he's like, let's go for a run. And I was like, great. Okay. I need to reapply my sunscreen because it is hot and sunny here in Arizona. I grabbed my tinted sunscreen because I'm like, I'm just going to be fancy today and just put on my tinted sunscreen to go for a run. And I'm not sure if it's the consistency, maybe the smell. Don't really know what it is about this specific tinted sunscreen, but we stopped running and my husband looks at me and he just starts dying laughing. And I was like, what is so funny? And I had gnats stuck all over my face, like probably like 15, 20 gnats on my face. So I was the windshield of a car running and they all just stuck to my face.
I'm dying. I am dying right now.
Wait, that is hilarious.
Do you have a picture?
There
no,
needs
I
to
should
be.
have taken one, but I think in the moment I was so embarrassed as he's like just laughed.
Is it like a thick sunscreen? How did you not feel the?
I don't know. I mean, we like I could tell because we were running on like the canal path, which is the only water in Arizona, that like we had run through a couple like, you know, when you go through like a bug tunnel and it just hits you, and I like, you know, you feel that part of it, but I didn't know they were sticking to me, and they weren't.
I am crying.
To the rest of my body, so like if I was looking at my arms or something like that, like I didn't see them. So
oh my god,
it was really cute.
That sounds really cute.
I love the sunscreen. It feels so fancy and it like has a nice little tinted glow to it. So I was like, you know, look good, feel good, do good when you're out on a run, and not the case.
It makes it even better that it was like your first experience with your new tinted sunscreen. Like, cause that does, you do like feel a little elevated when you get the tinted sunscreen on. It's like, ooh, look at me. I don't need any more makeup or anything. And here you are with like 30 gnats.
Oh,
that's funny.
That's hilarious. I'm crying over here.
If it happens again, which I don't think I'll wear that tinted sunscreen to run again, but if it happens again, I will take a picture and share it.
That is so funny. That is a great low. Not that we want great lows, but that was a great low. But Jesse, we are so excited to have you on today. We have so many questions about like fueling in the Final Four, and then also wanted to talk a little bit with you about fueling for Ramadan, because there was an athlete that was observing Ramadan on the team, and you would have never known when he was on the court. So we're really excited to kind of jump into some of that nutrition.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on and excited to talk about it.
Can you provide some guidance on meal timing and composition for athletes who are observing Ramadan, and how you help them to like optimize their energy levels for performance and especially during competition?
Yeah, I think from my experience, complete transparency, this was my first experience working with an athlete celebrating Ramadan and at this level with all the back-to-back-to-back games that we've had. So to kind of answer that question, what my strategy was to work backwards. So find out when the peak competition time is, whether that be practice or games or whatever, and then kind of work backwards. I learned a lot through this period time too. I do have to preface again that I do not celebrate Ramadan, don't know the inner workings and how everything is celebrated. And I learned a lot about the culture and a lot about the meaning behind everything. So that's pretty amazing as well. But to answer to the fueling piece, really the meal before the prayer in the morning, depending on where you are in the country, the timing is very different just because it varies per where you are. And so during that first meal, regardless of when your competition is later, so let's say with our athlete, the last time he could eat at some places were at 6 a.m. So if they had a game at 8 a.m., the fueling would look very different just because the carb complexity versus simplicity versus all of those things could vary. Hypothetically, if somebody had a practice at noon and their last meal was at 6, that meal would need to be a lot of complex carbs. So something that digests a little slower. So I talked to a bunch of other athletes. They use beans or brown rice or the slower digesting carbs that will kind of last a little bit longer through that. I used with our Ramadan athlete, I used the UCAN's cornstarch supplement. It is recommended to do it like not 6 hours or 12 hours before, but I was like, this can't hurt, just because it's a slower digesting carb. So basically long-winded answer there, but the kind of carbs that you eat will, when competition is, will determine what carbs you eat. And
was that heightened because of travel, as far as like if you guys were on the East Coast and then coming all the way out here to the Pacific time zone, or with that travel component in there?
Yeah, he did receive like an exception when we traveled. So there are different like exceptions to Ramadan and when you can break your fast. Athletic competitions can be one if you're female and have a menstrual cycle. That can be another time where you can break your fast. And then long travel or time changes can be included in that exception. Our athlete chose not to have an exception during athletic performance or competition, but during travel. So when we traveled to Arizona and the time change, he was able to eat. He popped out of the car all excited. He was like, Jesse, I can eat. And I was like, yes. Let's get as much food as we possibly can. But yeah, no, it did complicate things just because of the time changes. The prayer became a little earlier. So instead of our usual 5:30 wake up, it became 4 or 4:30. And then the sunset was a little later as well. So we're about the same time. So that didn't really help.
So you talked about like a 12 o'clock practice or like an 8 a.m. practice, but what about some of these like nighttime games that we were watching on TV?
Yeah, so I was honestly praying for the nighttime games. So when we had tips at like 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, I was almost relieved because we could break the fast during the game. And so, as you both know, and for those listening that might not know, you don't want to overwhelm the system all at once with all of the things. Like, obviously, I want to give him all of the sodium, all of the carbs, all of everything to like kind of revamp, but I had to kind of time that and choose wisely of when to do what.
What did you use to break the fast during the game?
So again, it really depended on the game time. So like if it was like half of a half, like a quarter of the game was there and he had been having a lot of minutes, then I would give him like a quick carb. So like a honey stinger gel and a banana, those were his like choices. And then kind of supplement that with either some Gatorade or just like not a lot of sugared electrolyte drinks. So a little tiny bit of right stuff. I would like, felt like a bartender on the side, like trying to just eyeball the amounts and doing like minor calculations and just to not overload the system with glucose. And then if it was like, let's say there was a game where 4 minutes in, he had to break his fast, I would do a UCAN gel, which was like a softer, kind of easier to digest type of gels, just because those are really hard to digest on an empty stomach, just in general. But you can makes a great product that kind of makes that a little easier.
Reilly and I talk a lot about practicing our fueling. Is this something that y'all practiced together to make sure that like things were tolerated well, or you had things already kind of on hand that we knew that this specific athlete liked?
So this athlete, we did sweat tests at the beginning. So like last May, when all of basketball comes in, I sweat test them. And then I really am hands-on with that team with like choosing your quick carbs, choosing like what you like, getting the bare minimum amount of grams. I know that sounds crazy, but like some guys won't eat breakfast in the morning. So I'll be like, okay, where's your 45 grams? We're about to practice. Or like I'll have little chews on the side of practice. So they'll eat during. So there wasn't necessarily like practice in terms of like all of the things, just because there could be resistance with that. But in terms of if he cramped during the game, I knew exactly like what amount to give him of what and what supplement and all of those things. So I guess there was like a slight practice, but this was definitely new territory for both of us.
Well, I think you were also practicing, like you were still training the gut to be able to accept food. We can't always, have this perfect game day situation. Like it's completely impossible. Making sure that at least like you were doing the sweat rate testing, you were doing stuff, because something that we see a lot of the time is people are like, what should I eat because I have a championship game? It's like, okay, well, like what were you eating for the last 6 months? Like, what were you doing?
Right. Yeah. And I knew he could tolerate like a lot of sodium PO, like way more. And I tracked everything and have all of the amounts. And it's nuts how much he was able to absorb and take in. Like during our regular season games, he was able to tolerate, the threshold was around 6,000 milligrams of sodium during one game and be fine. So that was really interesting to see, like, okay, playing with my thresholds, like, okay, we're here. Are we cramped at, X amount of sodium or X amount of glucose? Like, how can we make sure we're hitting those markers? So I had a lot of room to play with, which was really interesting.
I love that you brought that up, because we are talking about like Ramadan, like during March Madness Final Four, but it sounds like you were doing so much work with the team like prior to that to set you up for success. It wasn't just like, here's Jessie, she's going to do her thing for, 2 days. It's like, no, she's been here for 8 months, a year, 3 years, like you mentioned, doing all this stuff to help propel the team forward.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people understand, like there was a big emphasis on Ramadan, and obviously, but like I am feeding these guys during the game and like tracking their intake. Like they know exactly what to get. Like at this point in the season, they all had their routines. They knew exactly how many grams based on the minutes, based on all of those things. And they knew if they weren't taking it, I would come around with their normal things, whether that be like fruit cup or Cliff Blocks or what were the like Rice Krispie treats, like whatever they were like used to taking, like they had been taking it for a year now. And the big part, and I just want to highlight this, is that I had a lot of coaches buy-in, which was humongous for my role. As you both know, being dietitians, like the more people that like have your back in this role, just because it is a newer role within, especially like formal team setting. Like I had coach buy-in, I had athletic trainer support, I had strength coach support. So they knew exactly like what my messaging was and helped me kind of relay it without like overstepping. And it was like kind of a very beautiful dance between all of us.
It's so refreshing to hear that that's the experience that you had. And like as dietitians, we love to hear that there was coach buy-in, player buy-in, other support staff buy-in to make sure that these athletes are fueled for performance.
Right. And then like it became even to the point where like in a huddle, coach would be like, listen to her. Like he would stop and be like, take your drink, because every guy would take a cramp juice concoction, which was essentially just Powerade and Right Stuff, but it averaged out to be around 220 milligrams of sodium per cup, which was the average sweat rate per 4 minutes. So if you played 4 minutes, like within the team's sweat loss. So that's why like we were able to not cramp the entire like 5 games in 5 days kind of run, which was great. Like I wouldn't have been able to step in. In other teams, I'm only like there half the time because I have so many teams in the college setting that like if they were like, oh, you're coming with us postseason, all of these systems wouldn't have been as like a well-oiled machine. So very grateful for that.
It's so important. And it's so nice to also hear that they like let you do what you needed to do, because sometimes people have this idea of what a dietitian does, but it's not actually, what we actually do, or they think they want something, but it's not actually what they need. I remember like working basketball and like walking into the gym with like Rice Krispie treats and like everybody staring at me. And I'm like, the guys are actually going to eat these like during practice.
Right. Yeah, no. And it took a lot of like the gummies, and like even the coaches started to like grab like gummies during practice, like, or grabbing like a cramp juice cup like during practice. And I was like, all right, like as long as like the tub of gummies are like there there and people would be like, oh, I feel a little lightheaded, or I didn't eat lunch. I'm like, go see Jesse. And I'm like, oh, okay. So like, it was really refreshing to have that support and obviously that buy-in.
So we can basically attribute the success of the men's basketball team to you and proper fueling.
It was definitely a team effort there with every department, but I'm just grateful to be a part of it.
Sounds like a great team effort, especially from the standpoint of like having everyone bought in for every component, because there isn't just one component that makes y'all a successful basketball team. It's great to hear that.
And we joke like it's almost like parenting. Like if the strength coach, athletic trainer, or myself are off kilter just a little bit, they will find that little loophole and be like, well, Jesse told me I could do this. And they're like, well, no. So like being all on the same page to where I'm echoing what the strength coach and the athletic trainer is doing and vice versa is huge.
You've talked a little bit about the carbs during the game, but what are some of the other things that you implemented during your like Final Four run?
Yeah, so my big thing, and we all know like the performance plate method and all of those things, like basically just going through their checklist of like making sure that they're getting protein at the end of each game. And we did so many smoothies, like so many smoothies that I can't even like tell you. So shout out Tropical Smoothie and Smoothie King. Basically making sure like at night before the game, they're getting enough calories, enough carbs, enough protein like before. So like that could look anything, and it's going to sound wild to people not privy to the field, but we would always get tropical smoothie, their little vitamin packet that included cherry juice pills because none of them liked the cherry juice. So cherry juice pills, magnesium and zinc, and then Cane's, and shout out to Cane's, and some type of burger. So like Shake Shack or Whataburger was popular when we were in Texas. So all that to say, like a ton of calories and a ton of like balance was there in terms of like the smoothies plus all of the other things, just to make sure they're eating enough, number one. And number two, people could look at Cane's and be like, oh my God, she gave them Cane's. And it's like, well, it has sodium, it has carbs, and it has protein. So what are we talking about? Plus they're getting the smoothies. That was kind of like the other things that we were implementing throughout the season, but also like compromising with the athletes. Like they're not going to come out and eat something wildly different that they're not used to, or they're going to look at me sideways if I give them quote unquote something that somebody thinks is healthy. So like a kale salad with chicken and like chickpeas and like think of like the epitome of like what people deem healthy. We were not doing that because they would have not done that.
It's just not realistic. Like it's just not like, and we always talk about like the easy and simple, like, and realistic things work, right? A performance weight method works, right? The smoothie combined with the cane, like it works. I saw DJ Burns with a smoothie multiple times in his hand, and I thought of you every single time.
Yes.
You go, Jesse.
Yes. Just because of the carbs and like the needing, like with that. And it was also an easy way to get hydration in and just the antioxidants, like all of those things. It was just like, that's what we're doing.
It also tastes good.
Yes, it tastes good. It was like an easy buy-in as opposed to like drink a whole vat of cherry juice because you need it. Like no one's going to do that. So I also worked with like OIAM with their cherry juice, like pills. So it was like, you got your pills and your smoothie and did the checklist at snack at night.
I think when it comes to buy-in too, we have to put it in perspective that this is still like a college-aged team. Like we can't expect them to go all of a sudden to eating, like you said, that traditional, like thought of as healthy meal with a kale salad and chicken, especially if that's not what they're used to. And like, we want to keep that as familiar as possible with the fueling and things like that, because there isn't going to be that buy-in if it's not something that tastes good and it's not something that's like familiar.
Right. And at the end of the day, these guys are making more money than I am. So they're going to go get it by themselves. So I might as well get them what they want and kind of come up with that happy medium to be like, okay, we'll do Cane's if you take your vitamins tonight.
Well, also too, it's something that they're used to, because where are you going to find a kale salad with chickpeas at 11 p.m. after a game?
Right.
Not happening.
And that was what we were used to like all season, all last season. Like that is like our traditional snack of like kind of just honestly focusing on the calories standpoint. Even talking about like other sports I work, like it's just that happy medium of finding that middle ground of what works and what doesn't, being realistic. Kind of what you said, Reilly.
But people are going to come for us that we just talked about promoting Cane's for 10 minutes on this podcast. But you know what? It works.
Well, it kind of goes back to like what people think a dietitian is and what our role is and all of those things, like looking at a food for what the nutrients it's giving you, regardless if it's fried chicken or kale. Like it's not healthy or unhealthy. It's just different.
They just have a different feeling focus.
Exactly. Exactly.
I was just about to say that because I was talking to somebody this morning about fueling focuses and how other individuals around her, like her friends and her family, like their fueling focus might be different. And that's okay. But that fueling focus changes. So maybe we aren't using the same strategies that we would use for an athlete in comparison to someone else who's maybe non-athlete or just an active individual.
Oh, 100%. And even just like post college, like if you're thinking about like me as an athlete versus me after college and not an athlete, it just looks different. And also thinking about like men's basketball in particular, these guys are tall and they need a lot of calories and a lot of energy to like kind of sustain what they're doing, especially like back to back to back games and on the road and travel and all of the stress that they're undergoing. So like you said, the fueling focus is just keeping that in mind before you come at us about games.
I mean, also like even like people on the team, like different positions have different energy needs.
Yeah. 100%.
We talk about that we should call this podcast It Depends because it literally depends for nutrition, and it depends again.
100%.
Reilly has asked this question before. Were there any like specific things like superstitions as far as nutrition or like things that athletes had to have before the game or maybe even after the game that they were like, this is my thing, I have to have it? I know that we've talked to somebody who was like, the team had to have pancakes the morning of the game and stuff like that. Was there anything like that for the NC State basketball team?
I'm not going to say that there was a lot of superstition going on, but there was a lot of superstition going on. In terms of even myself, like getting to the stadium early and setting up all of the carbs and all of the nutrition products that I had in the locker room for them. Like even that routine, I was like, nope, that is happening. Keeping pregame meal the same. So postseason, we were able to kind of expand the menu a little bit and we just kept it the same. In terms of like fueling and superstition, I think not necessarily superstition, but just routine. So like they knew what worked and they knew what they needed. And so they just like kept doing that and kind of like creating that buy-in. This is such a tangent from that, but it just kind of goes back to what we were saying. Like you can't just implement things on the championship game. Like you can't just do something new. We even tried different IVs like way before. So I guess there was a little bit of practice before the competition just to see if it would tolerate. My whole thing with them is that we all know that there's going to be a little bit of a loss during the season in terms of muscle, in terms of gains, in terms of all of that, just especially if you're a high minute guy or high minute athlete, if we're expanding this to multiple teams. So with that being said, like how can we mitigate that the least to kind of either maintain or slightly see a dip? So, and we track that with ADEXA. So basically my big thing with buy-in was like, find what works for you and do that every single game day, every single day before the game. I have a 48-hour rule with them, which is like, that's when carb load happens and that's when hydration happens. So like 2 days out, every single game, even our like pregame scrimmage, I was like 48 hours. They all make like jokes at me and they're like 48 hours, you got to drink your water. But towards the end there, it was like coaches being like, hey, it's 48 hours. Like, listen, drink everything, do all the right things. So all that to say, not necessarily superstition, but just routine at that point, which I guess kind of go hand in hand.
We always talk about like you thrive in the off season. So like when you're not in this high pressure situation, like that's when you can start testing out things like testing out the IVs, like you mentioned, trying out different things, maybe changing body composition, because during season, you're just trying to survive. Like you're going to see that drop in body comp, especially with like those male athletes. So it's like, what are we doing in the off season to prepare us for season and then the championship?
Yeah, absolutely. People didn't realize that started in May, of last year to the date almost, when we got a whole new team in. And so it'll be interesting, this new wave, this new team and everything, just the nature with college basketball and how it's going with the transfer portal.
Jesse, so we have some ending questions we ask all of our guests. The first question is, what is your favorite carbohydrate? It's the More Carbs podcast, so we have to know.
My favorite carb, I love dried fruit. Like dried mangoes is my jam. I love dried fruit. Dried fruit or just any type of fruit. I know that's a boring dietitian answer, but I could crush a lot of fruit.
Dried mango though is like untouched. It's so good. All right, what's your favorite pre-workout fuel?
Either like I said, a dried mango, or I really love pretzels. Yeah, either dried mangoes or pretzels. Those are my two.
I like the pretzel answer because I think a lot of people forget about pretzels. And a lot of people are like, sometimes don't want to eat something sweet before they work out. So pretzels are great. What's your favorite post-workout fuel?
I love like a peanut butter chocolate banana smoothie. Like that is like, oh my God. If it's not a meal, like that is my like, give me 15 of those. I could crush those. So yeah, peanut butter chocolate banana, that's my go-to.
Do you have a specific way that you make your peanut butter chocolate smoothie?
God, this is so like dietitian, it hurts. But I put in like spinach or kale and then ice and then Vega protein powder, shout out Vega, Vega Sport, chocolate, and then chocolate almond milk or chocolate soy milk just for added protein, and then bananas and obviously peanut butter.
It's so good, but the simple stuff works.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our last question seems to be the hardest one. It's not related to nutrition at all, but we're big shoe people here. So what's your favorite pair of kicks?
Favorite pair of kicks? Oh, I like my platform high top Converse.
Are they a certain color?
They are like lavender.
Jesse, thank you so much for being on this episode of the Eat More Carbs podcast. We so appreciate you being here and sharing all of your knowledge as far as basketball, Ramadan, and just fueling for athletic performance. For anyone who wants to follow you or find you on social media, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can follow my page, jdm.nutrition on Instagram, or the Dietitian Mindset podcast. That's where you can find me.
We will leave all of Jesse's contact information as well as the link to her podcast in the podcast show notes. If you have questions for Reilly and I, you can always leave them below, or you can find us on Instagram. We're at the Eat More Carbs podcast. You can find me on Instagram at jenna.fisher.nutrition, and you can find Reilly at reilly.beatty.nutrition. Thank you again for listening to this episode. Please make sure you rate, subscribe, and review. And as always, remember to eat more carbs.